Thank you for attending today. Today's topic is supplier management, specifically in this case with Fusion 360 Manage. So we're going to talk about several things today, all related, at least to some degree, with suppliers and supplier management, managing your supply chain, largely maybe from an engineering perspective at least. Fusion 360 Manage is a product lifecycle management software. So we'll be focusing on that aspect of supplier management. So we'll talk a little bit about the challenges of supply chain and getting things that you need when you need them, where you need them. And then we'll dig into really 4 different areas of managing the supply chain, or at least in the context of the things that you design. Collaboration with suppliers, be it something that you're purchasing or something that you're having made. How managing change intersects with suppliers and supply management. How Fusion Manage can help you resolve bottlenecks. And how you can bring third parties, which suppliers typically are, directly into your business processes using Fusion Manage to further remove bottlenecks and improve efficiency. So the way I decided to approach this topic was, for each of these categories, come up with several questions that surround each of these topics. The why, the what, the how, etc. And then discuss how Fusion Manage can help answer those questions, and then the impact of how Fusion Manage would answer those questions can have on supply chain management in general. So let's start with discussing challenges, right? And I mean, anyone who's had to deal with a vendor, getting a part, getting something made, etc. They're probably aware of. You're probably aware of, issues that have come up. Communicating across different time zones, people work at different hours, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, right? So, that's a major challenge. Getting the right information to the right people at the right time so that they can make timely decisions. So that's a major challenge, of course. Managing change, especially when you're working with vendors where you're outsourcing components. These days, delivery times are always so short and carefully managed that you need to get information into the hands of people that need it as soon as possible, sometimes even before things are finalized, right? So it becomes important when, especially those late stage changes come up, that you can accurately communicate with everyone who needs to be informed what changed and what impact that has on their area of a project or what they're doing. Finding and reacting to bottlenecks, right? Anytime communication is hard enough internally, right? Even if someone might even be in the same building, finding where something is stuck and identifying not only within a given project or process, but more holistically, identifying where problems happen on every project or on most projects so that you can prevent those from happening on future projects. That can be incredibly difficult to do without a big picture, of what's going on, right? So, this one project went great. The next project, things got delayed. And then the next project, I think we got a little bit behind, without a way to, collate and easily view information about what happened and who did what and when they did it. It can be hard to continuously improve your processes. And then just all of the information that we have to share with suppliers to get things done. It could be as simple as, okay, here's the part number I need. Tell me how much it costs, and then, here's where you send it. But more often we're doing things like trying to share drawings, share things like step files or DXF files for CAM operations, communicating requirements so that we can communicate accurately what we need to get an accurate quote and pay a fair price, and make sure we're getting what we ordered. There's a lot of information and often a lot of back and forth sometimes, especially through email and whatnot, to try to make sure we're paying what we should for something and getting what we paid for. Right, so a lot of challenges, when we're trying to just get stuff built and it's not something that we're building in-house. It's essentially why we need our supply chain. And so let's start with collaboration, right? That's, I think probably the most important part of this is just communication, not just send something to someone and they send something back. That happened to me once ever in my entire professional career, that I sent a set of drawings to somebody and they sent something back and it was correct. I don't think it'll ever happen again. But the people involved, engineers, the people specifying what it is that either needs to be purchased or what needs to be made. The person sort of in the middle facilitating that transaction, procurement, purchasing on our side, where we have to give information to them and they typically in turn pass it off to a vendor or multiple vendors to get quotes, for example. And of course we have the suppliers, the people that would be providing those things to us. The what in this situation, what are we communicating? We often have to send drawings, we have to send bills of material. We make requests for quote, we receive those quotes back. And then especially changes, communicating changes. We got a quote for a part and now we need to make a slight change to it. And okay, yeah, we were going to drill those holes anyway. They just changed a little bit, their spacing changed or their size changed. So we don't expect it to cost anymore or, take any more time, but we need to make sure the holes are right when it comes in, right? So making sure that we're accurately communicating our changes to our supply chain, that's part of the collaborative process. And then the how is, really where it gets sticky. Again, because of all of that information we have to share, where people are and when they work. And there are just a lot of artifacts, right? There could be phone calls, which are, having a phone call is often a good way to get things sorted out, but it also leaves really nothing documented, other than the notes you might take. Email is great, but we all get way too much email, right? And all these artifacts that we have, we email a step file. Oh, the step file is too large to send via email, so now we've got an FTP site in the mix, or we've got Dropbox, or who knows what, right? And then, okay, here's a PDF sitting in my inbox, and oh, here's another PDF, and this one came on Monday and this one came on Tuesday, or I got two of them on Monday. Which of them is the right one? So now I'm looking at timestamps, and it can just become a real mess trying to figure out not only, and then when a problem comes up, that's, what did we send? When did we send it? Did they confirm that they got it? All sorts of things that, if you're just using email, becomes a mess, right? And so this is one area where Fusion Manage can really help, is the how. The what doesn't really change so much. We're always going to have drawings, we're always going to have bombs, and there's going to be quotes and all that stuff, and things are always going to change, right? But Fusion Manage can really help in how you communicate, how people participate in the process, and managing a process, putting a definition to the process versus just Well, we usually email it, and then they usually email us back, and then sometimes we have to get on the phone, and sometimes we talk to this person about this, and sometimes we talk to this person about that, and I don't remember who we talked to. Um, you know, Rather than that, we can have a nice, well-defined process in software that not only enables a given transaction or a given unit of work with a supplier, but also enables us to look at even long-term trends over time to make sure that we're always getting better. So the rest of this presentation is about highlights of, the four things we talked about: collaboration, managing change, removing bottlenecks, and third-party access. And again, I decided to structure this, when I was putting together this presentation, it's like, well, what do we mean by supplier collaboration? What's involved in that? And what do we mean by managing change, especially in the context of supply chain management? So I just went with questions. These are questions that I would ask, if you're talking about, well, what is supplier collaboration, and what is, how does it work? That to me led pretty clearly into, well, here are the things that we do, and here are maybe the problems that we have, and here are how something like Fusion Manage can help solve those problems. So, the questions that I thought of, we're talking about collaborating with people. We're talking about a given need. I need to have something made. We can't make it in-house, right? What do I need to send them? Who are we sending it to? When do we send it? Are we ready to send it yet? Is the work done, right? And what did we send yesterday, right? So those are just a few questions that I thought of when I was thinking about a given unit of work to a supplier. What does that involve, right? And here is some of the you could call it functionality, I guess. We might be getting a little into the weeds today in terms of functionality, but just the features and the capabilities that Fusion Manage can provide to help answer these questions. Right. So if you're not familiar with Fusion Manage, here in a minute, I'll give you just a very high level overview of what it is, and then we'll just see some examples really of some of the behaviors and some of the features and what it can provide to help answer these questions and solve some of these problems. So I guess really even before I get into talking some of these specifics, bombs, files, rev control, let's take just a really, really brief tour of Fusion Manage. So if you've never heard of Fusion 360 Manage, Fusion 360 Manage is a product lifecycle management software by Autodesk, provided or created by Autodesk. It is designed to manage all aspects of the product design, build, its life cycle, and even up through retirement. And there's a lot there to that whole process, right? We've got the concept of introducing a new product. That product's got to get designed. It ultimately gets built. In both the design and the build phase, change happens, right? That change has got to be managed. As we're building, we want to make sure we're meeting our quality targets, right? If we're buying things or having things made for us, we got to deal with suppliers, right? So new product introduction, the design phase, like managing bills of material, managing change, managing quality, and managing suppliers. Those are kind of like the big 5 things that I think about that Fusion Manage was kind of designed to do. But ultimately, just about any business process you'd want to capture and have people participate in and report on, Fusion Manage can help with that. So it's an incredibly powerful tool for managing a product lifecycle, yes, but all sorts of other things that you might need to manage around things that have a bill of materials or things that change or just information in general. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is my Fusion Manage homepage. You might call it your dashboard. There are a few aspects of that. I have some KPIs here at the top, just some charts for where things stand. We'll talk more about reporting here in a minute. I've got a work list. I can see all the stuff that I need to do. This kind of gets into the whole resolving bottlenecks thing. I've got some bookmarks, some records that, I come back to frequently, and then a history, things that I looked at. And the way Fusion Manage works, it is completely cloud-based, right? And we just have, essentially, you can think of them as tasks, something I need to do. They're organized into what we call workspaces. And I might need to, depending on my role, in this case, I'm playing a lot of roles here. So I have a lot of things that I could do. I could, participate in some change management, some quality management, some product development, some high level categories and things that we need to do. And then, from there, things like I need to work with an item, or, a bill of materials, or I need to participate in a change process, or I need to, participate in a quality action, like a corrective or preventive action, for example, right? So it's a very intuitive, very easy to use system. I personally, right now, I'm seeing a lot on my menu here. There's a lot more that the system can do. I've sort of limited my view of the system for this presentation so that we can see specifically what I wanted to focus on today. But it's very easy to use. Again, very intuitive. It's an information management system. We have records. I've got, in case I'm looking at part numbers, for example, I could look at a part number and I could see some information about that part number. Really, any information that you might want to capture. We're looking at a default configuration of a system here right now. All of this that you see here, all of the property fields and lots of behaviors that are all configurable. And it's very easy to configure these things. Fusion Manage is not like other product lifecycle management systems I've seen in the past where configuration and management is a full-time job. It really is the kind of thing that with Fusion Manage, you can start small, configure over time, grow as you need, and your configuration and your changes are very easy to make and very easy to implement. Be it changing the information that gets captured about a component, or looking at bill of materials. Files can be associated with these records as well. So, for example, if I'm looking at an assembly where this component might be used, all of this takes place inside the browser, right? So from any device, assuming we can actually load the file up, right? So that's the idea, is a cloud-based system, easy to configure, easy to use, easy to limit the scope of what people can see and what they can do. So at a high level, that's what Fusion Manage is. Now, for the rest of the presentation, we're going to dig into some of the specifics, really kind of around, again, where it all intersects with supply chain and supply chain management. So back to these questions. When it comes to supplier collaboration, what do we send? Like, what am I sending? What do I need to send to someone? Well, Fusion Manage, we can manage bills of material. We can manage the file artifacts related to those bills of material. Now, not usually like native CAD data, but what non-CAD users might need related to one of these things. So a step file, or a DXF file, or a PDF, or a Word document, something that's got requirements on it or specifications, but also revision control. Not only I need to send a step file, but I need to make sure I'm sending the latest revision, a step file corresponding to that latest revision, right? Now, who do we send it to? You can manage suppliers in Fusion Manage. You could have, for example, just a list of all of the people that you do business with, right? So I could look down at my supply chain here and look at my suppliers. So I just have a big list of all of the companies that we do business with in this case, or at least that where we need to, in this system. Information, contact information, who's responsible for, reviewing this supplier, their status, other information, right? So, this can help us not only here's the information about the supplier, right? But when it comes to a specific component, right? So if we go take a look at just one of these components, we have this concept of an approved manufacturers list. So this could be a list of those suppliers that says, here's who we typically would go to for this, like if it's something that we buy. But also in terms of our sourcing here, information of these suppliers, a list of suppliers, who's our preferred supplier, things like quantity and min and max cost. So we can really start to put together a lot of information about not just here's the bill of materials for this thing, but here's what we pay for each of these things and roll up something like a cost, for example. Things that might often be done in ERP, but more execution focused versus PLM, which is more information process and, metric focused, I would say. Right, so Fusion Manage can help us understand who should be contacted about this, what we're sending them, when do we send it? Well, that's where workflow comes in, right? So Fusion Manage is amazing at capturing processes. So we'll take a look at, say, a change order workflow here, because that's an interesting process to look at, right? So any record in the system can go through workflow. This workflow is incredibly customizable and configurable. So if we've got a procurement process or a quoting process for components that we're having made, for example, we could track, in the case of a component's, release, for example, this is the point where we send out initial information for a quote. This is the point where we've received back that quote. Here's where we received maybe a first article from the vendor. And then eventually, that process is done. So keeping track of when you're supposed to do something and notifying people that they've got something to do through, for example, what we can see here on my dashboard, tasks. Like in this case, I'm supposed to be reviewing some sketches that we're going to send to a vendor, for example. Knowing when things need to be done, Fusion Manage can help with that. What did we send yesterday? Revision history. We can look back at things that have changed. So, for example, if we take a look at a bill of materials, so let's go back, take a look at one of my favorite components, this jet engine model. We can see we're currently on revision B in production. Now I can look at the bill of materials for this component, and we're looking at current information right now. But let's say, well, I know I sent Rev A to the vendor. We just got a change about this. What changed? Is that going to impact what they're doing? Right? I can come here and I can say I want to do a compare revision B against revision A, right? Either particular revisions, or I can compare by date as well if we're still like in a work in progress situation. But I'm comparing revs in this case, and I can see, well, we changed to Rev B, that's what's current. And I can look through the list here and I can see, well, we removed a couple of components here. These were just, lube and Loctite, but it looks like we've added some components here. So if we're having someone build this, we should probably make sure that they've got this updated BOM so they know that what changes need to be made. Right? And then a bonus question here that wasn't on my list. I wanted to keep it, in my pocket here. Do we send anything at all? Right? We're going to get into this a little bit later, but depending on how you implement Fusion Manage and how comfortable you all are with the idea of this, it could be that you don't actually send anything at all. They may be able to come into your system and just get the information that they need when they need it, right? So they could get a notification, or, if they're participating in your workflow, They could log into your Fusion Managed tenant. Again, remember there's, this is cloud-based, no VPN required. They could have a task on their list saying, we need a quote for this. And they don't have to download, they don't have to look through email or anything. It's all right here. They could go to their task. That task could have an attachment with a drawing on it that they need to review and quote. They could provide information either on this same record or in a separate record you create for them. And then there's no email at all. It all stays in the system and they participate, right? They're practically a part of your business, which would be the perfect situation, right? Because if there was no barrier or boundary at all between you and your supplier. Right, so again, what we get out of this, we get accurate information accessible in one location in terms of what do we send. Who do we send it to? We send it to the right people, fewer delays, we get our parts back, we deliver faster. We can reduce delays and bottlenecks by knowing when to send things. Affirmative confirmation, we're ready to send this, let's send it off. We can prevent misquotes, we can prevent incorrect product delivery. Imagine sending something out for quote, 6-month lead time, which is not at all unheard of these days. It comes in and it's wrong. Is it going to be another 6 months to get that component? Well, now what do you do, right? Or are you paying 5 times as much to get bumped to the front of the line? And then whose mistake was it, right? That can become a whole mess in and of itself. And then again, if they can participate directly in your system, track their performance within the system, removing bottlenecks, improving efficiency, right? These are all results that we can get from using Fusion Manage to help ease collaboration with our suppliers. So now let's talk about change. Because it's inevitable, right? It always happens. It's bad enough when something changes internally, communicating those changes, but again, when you've got to communicate outside the business, it's even worse. And questions around this process: what is changing? Should we change it? Is this a viable solution, right? If we're changing it, is our solution viable? Is this a one-off thing, or is this indicative of a more systemic problem that we need to solve? Is this well, the part came in wrong from the supplier, that's why it doesn't fit, or, well, the tolerance, we have this problem on 30% of our parts, and maybe it's because our tolerances aren't quite right, right? Who's supposed to do this change, and who and how do we notify, right? So again, this is really more general change we're talking about, but change and issues around change are exacerbated when you're dealing with third parties and suppliers, right? So some of the tools we have at our disposal in Fusion Manage to help, ease this change process, the concept of problem reports and inspection reports. So this kind of intersects with quality as well. So problem reports or inspection reports are a way that people with access to the system can raise an issue, right? They can create a problem report. They can fill out information about it. It has a process that it goes through, right? And that can then in turn kick off a more holistic process, right? Getting into the idea of, is it a systemic problem? Well, we can look through our problem reports over time and see, okay, this part has 7 problem reports against it in the last 6 months. Maybe we need to take a deeper look at what's going on with that part, right? The CAPA process, again, this is more of a broader range process, corrective and preventive action, where there's a very deep investigation of a problem. The should we change it? It could be as simple as an ECR, a change request. If we think it's a one-off thing, we expect we need to change this. ECR is where we do our investigation. Here's what we think we're going to do. Is that solution viable, right? So again, an ECR has its own process, right? So we are investigating a problem. We come up with a solution, right? Is this the right solution? If so, we create a change order to actually execute that change. That gets into who's responsible for doing that work, right? So what this lets us do is we can compartmentalize this work so that with all of the people involved in the change process, you're not necessarily getting overwhelmed with the entire process. You're not looking at, you know, a 30-step flow chart here for raising a problem, figuring out what to do, doing the work and implementing it. You know, that entire process, depending on how complex your needs are, that could be like a 30-step chain with 10 people involved. The person who's responsible for raising the issue, they don't need to see all that. You know, a lot of times even the person doing the work, like I'm making this change, just an engineer with a big list of changes they've got to make, they just need a zoomed in, very narrow view of just what they need to do. That's one of the great things Fusion Manage lets you do, is compartmentalize this work so that people see what they need to see when they need to see it, right? That gets into the who's supposed to do the work, you know, should we change it? All of these questions get easier to answer when you can focus, and Fusion Manage lets you focus, right? In terms of systemic problems, you know, the CAPA process, of course, but also reporting. This is a very important part of Fusion Manage, and really running a business at all is understanding where you are, where you're headed, and if you have gotten where you want to go, right? So for example, here's a chart right here. This is a list of non-conformances by supplier. It's just a bar chart. So we can see we got various suppliers down here, and here are all of the issues we've had with components from these suppliers, right? So if one of these bars is really tall, okay, maybe we should look at what's going on with that. Do we have poor communication with that supplier? Are they delivering substandard work? You know, what's the problem? We can look at this information over time just by people putting in problem reports or issuing non-conformances when they inspect something when it comes in, right? Just by doing their day-to-day work over time, this reporting becomes extremely valuable. So this may be at specific components, but then more broadly, we can manage our suppliers and do things like managing our suppliers and keeping track of where they are. We can periodically audit them, for example. So we have a few suppliers that are under review. We've got some new ones that we're trying to vet. We've got a few that we're actively auditing, right? So again, this gets us a sense of, you know, how stable is our supply chain? How are they doing? And really any information, these reports that we see here, these are reports that I chose to have on my dashboard. There are many reports that are defined in the default configuration that you can see here. And with proper permission, you can create reports on any of the data in the system, right? So here's just a big list of reports that we can either get data out as Excel. So if it's not just I need a pretty picture, but I need data that I can crunch, we can download to Excel, right? So this, you know, approval state, again, this active, how many suppliers do we have? We actually download this in Excel format. Right? And take a look at this information right here. So reporting is an incredibly important part of Fusion Manage and getting the most value out of the day-to-day work that you do. And again, this information just sort of adds up as people do their day-to-day tasks. Okay, and then notification, the concept of a change notice or emails can go out. If you're working in the system, you have things like on your work list, on your dashboard, right? So you've got information right in your face at all times, like here's what I need to be doing, right? And here are tasks, all of these red flags are out of date, right? So this is the stuff that I need to do. I can sort by due date, for example. Here are the things that I need to do right away. Right. So the end result of using these tools, we can raise issues faster with more complete information, right? We can bring problems to light sooner rather than later, which is always good. And we can make sure appropriate information is included when that alarm is triggered so that we can solve these problems faster. We have better informed decision making because of that, right? A process around deciding whether a change should be made, not just, yeah, it feels like we should do this, so let's do it, right? Removing bottlenecks, making sure with the right process, there's the right people review things in a timely fashion and make that decision. Reporting, better informed decision making, which you know, I have a hard time deciding things, right? I want information when I make a decision. The more information I have, the better I feel about making that decision. Fusion Manage can deliver just as much information as you'd ever want, either on a broad view or down to very detailed to help you make those decisions. And again, just removing bottlenecks, right? Process, using ECO, using ECN, using ECR to make sure the right people are involved at the right time and that you can escalate things. So if something's been sitting undone for a couple days or a couple weeks, depending on the priority, it reappears, right? It gets back in your face to make sure you know this needs to be done. It's not just sitting in an inbox somewhere. So I've used the word bottlenecks about 100 times so far, you know, in this discussion. Let's talk a little bit more detail about that, right? Because that's one of the bigger problems these days with supply chain is things are stuck. Things are taking too long. We need priority on this and we can't get it, or it's, you know, we wanted something in 6 weeks and it's going to take 12, right? So when we're trying to remove bottlenecks, well, first we need to make sure what really is a priority versus what isn't, because if we can't eliminate a bottleneck, we have to make sure we put things in the right priority, first in, first out kind of thing, right? But if we're trying to identify those bottlenecks, where is something stuck and why is it stuck? In terms of particular activity or process, et cetera. But more generally, how often does this happen? How many things are stuck? Is it a systemic problem that we need to solve, right? And if we've identified problems, well, the solutions that we have hypothesized for those problems, are they effective? Are we getting better or worse at what we're trying to do? And then where that intersects with suppliers is, okay, well, is the bottleneck on our side or on their side? What have they done? What are they doing? What are their processes like? Are they performing to the best of their ability so that we can focus on our own problems, right? And so we've already talked about a lot of these features that Fusion Manage would have to help with this, right? The idea of tasks and our outstanding work, the concept of delegation, right? So if I've got work to do, this is, I think, one of the great parts about Fusion Manage. I've got all this outstanding work and I'm about to go on vacation. This still has to get done. I'm now a bottleneck and I'm going to feel a little bit bad, at least, about going on vacation when I still got all this stuff that I didn't manage to get to, right? Well, I can actually delegate my work, right? I could say, Easter vacation, right? And so anything that I might have to do when it comes to, change orders or change requests, et cetera, I want, until, I come back from Easter vacation, I want Larry to do that for me, right? and I can just turn that on, right? So now I could still do the work while I'm in the office, but whatever I don't get to, now my work's going to show up on Larry's list as well, right? So now I'm no longer a bottleneck, right? Because at least someone else in the office now is going to see that needs to be done, and they can get it done, right? And I didn't have to call Larry. I mean, I probably should have asked him before I just gave him all my work, right? But I didn't have to, sit down with him and say, okay, I need you to do all this stuff here. Now it's just on his list, and he should have the information he needs through attachments and the information about that thing to actually do his work, or do my work, I guess, now that it's his work, right? So delegation, I think, is a fantastic way to remove bottlenecks. You no longer necessarily have to focus on one person. If they're out, nothing gets done, right? Where and why is a process stuck? Again, the idea of workflow and tasks, escalation. Again, if a workflow step, so again, a workflow step meaning, right now, I could either confirm that I've done this task, or confirm that I'm doing it, I suppose, or I could say, no, that's already done. If it's sitting here in this step for a week, somebody needs to know about it, because I at least should have acknowledged that I'm going to do the work, right? So we can design our workflows such that if something doesn't get done for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, then notification can go out and say, okay, this has been sitting here too long, right? Again, bottleneck removal. Reporting, we've already talked about. How many processes are stuck? Are we getting better or worse? Another example report would be our tasks by priority, right? We can see we've got 4 different projects here. Most of our projects only have a couple of pending tasks. One of them has a lot. So is project 5 in trouble, or is it just a big project, right? We can dig down and look at project 5 and look at the details, the tasks, who is assigned to what, where are they overdue, etc. Right? And also, are we prioritizing properly? If this is our tasks by priority, well, most of our tasks are what we consider normal. We've got some low priority and some high priority. If this entire chart is blue and we call everything a high priority, people aren't going to be able to prioritize, right? Or if everything is just listed as normal, well, are we sure some of these aren't more important? Is that causing a problem? Is stuff that could be put off till later, causing a delay in something more important, right? Reporting becomes incredibly effective. And again, users can create their own reports, and reports can be published so that anyone with permission on those workspaces can review them or display them on their dashboard. So what do we get out of it, right? What do we get out of doing this with Fusion Manage? We do the right thing at the right time, right? Because we can set priority. We can identify issues and their resolutions quickly. We can identify trends and implement systemic solutions, right? So through our reporting, we can identify, okay, either this person or this supplier or this process, there's something about it that constantly causes delays. Right? We can validate our continuous improvement plans, right? Everybody should be trying to improve all the time, right? That is the nature of life, in my opinion. But how do you know if you're actually doing better? It's nice to say, yes, we have a plan. We're planning to do better. This is our goal. How do you know, are you hitting it, right? Fusion Manage can absolutely help with that. And then when it comes to suppliers, how are suppliers doing? Identify trends before they become serious problems, right? Again, looking at a report like non-conformances by supplier, if we've got one supplier that's well above average and issues that they've had, okay, before this is at 2, before it gets to 10, maybe we should look at what they're doing in our relationship with them and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure they deliver on time and what we asked for. And then the last little bit here, secure third-party access. Right? Now, this is always a bit of a touchy subject. Security is a bigger and bigger deal these days. But there's no denying that if you can involve people directly in your processes, get them into your system somehow safely, you really break down a lot of barriers and can really gain a lot of productivity and remove a lot of delays and bottlenecks. So if we were going to allow people into our system that don't work for us, how would that happen? How would they connect? What can they see? And what are they allowed to do? How do we make sure they're doing what they're supposed to and they're not doing things that they're not supposed to? And why would we even do this in the first place? Why would we let them touch our system and manipulate our information, right? Well, Fusion Manage has some fantastic capabilities when it comes to this, right? So first of all, it's completely cloud-based. You have an internet connection, you have a device that can render like an HTML5 web page. You can work with Fusion Manage, phone, tablet, Mac, PC, whatever. And there's a license type, the enterprise license type, that lets third parties get into your system with no additional cost. So if you need a lot of supplier management, you have a lot of third parties, you can get a license type where you can just essentially give access to whoever you need. The alternative would be that your supplier would need a license of Fusion Manage, but there's some incredibly cost-effective ways for people to do that, depending on what they need to do. And even, the full license type for all access within Fusion Manage is incredibly cost-effective to the point where I can't imagine the cost would be an issue given what you can get out of it. Right? What can they see? Fusion Manage has incredibly fine-grained security controls. You can control access essentially almost down to the record level, or the field level, I should say. So if I'm looking at a component here, this details page, and especially, if we're looking at, say, this one here where we've got, I grabbed the wrong workspace again. Let me grab this workspace. These part numbers have information about who do we buy from and what does it cost. You absolutely don't want your suppliers to see this information, right? They know what they're charging you. You don't want them to know what other people are charging you. You could absolutely make it to where they could see the basic information. They could maybe see dimensions, or they could see some details, but they could not see the sourcing information. You can see that when you look at this record. They cannot, right? If you needed to, though, you could separate this into a completely separate record that has all this information directly linked to that record, so that they can't even get any of this information at all. They're seeing sort of a snapshot of this in a completely separated environment, right? Again, what can they do? That security model, how do we verify? So if they're allowed to do more than just approve things or look at information, we have this concept of, there's the change log. And this kind of gets into intersects with a lot of different areas, auditing, et cetera. You can see absolutely everything that was done to this thing, and who did it and when they did it, right? So information about what changed and when, it's all right here. Whether it's just, these are a bunch of information changes, et cetera. If we look at Rev A, a lot was done to Rev A, right? We added a bunch of information here. I can see exactly who did it, when they did it, and what they changed. Not only that, did someone delete some information? Yeah, we changed this. It was this and it was this. So you don't even lose information. If someone were to go in there and delete a bit of information or change a value, you can see what it was. That way, if they broke something, you can put it back to what it was supposed to be, right? So incredibly powerful security, incredibly powerful logging and auditing, right? And so why would we bring people into this environment? Well, because we have the tools we need to grant them the right access and let them enable our processes without putting any of our information at risk, right? So using Fusion Management, something like this, no VPN, nearly any device, the right data at the right time, direct participation in the process to remove bottlenecks. Our changes are captured in minute detail, so our information is protected. And overall, we can remove uncertainty, we can eliminate bottlenecks, and we can provide accountability. So getting people into the system directly, whether they work for us or not, is a huge benefit. And it is incredibly easy with something like Fusion Manage. So just to summarize, implementing Fusion 360 Manage to help manage your suppliers can help you send the right information to the right people at the right time. It can help you manage change more effectively, both internally and externally. It helps you identify bottlenecks and validate your improvement initiatives. And it has the tools necessary to allow third parties to directly and safely interact with your business processes and your product data. All right, so we have a few questions that have come up. I'll address these. One of them, could my manager assign my tasks to Larry in case I forgot before I left the office? That's a great question that I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. So I will look that up and I will let you know. My first thought is maybe not. I think it has to be done on a personal level, but I'll take a look and see if there's some way that I don't know. So that was one question. The next question, if there are a couple of vendors working outside of the PLM, can the ERP drive the quote information to update PLM that a task has been completed? That's another really great question. And the concern there is, so that's a great question. So let's say we have lots of suppliers, right? And maybe we've managed to get 80% of our suppliers into Fusion Manage and they're participating in our processes. But 20%, they're just behind the times. It's a machine shop. They do great work. They're just not computer people, right? So now are we pushing buttons here in this system for them, creating more work for our folks, right? That's a completely valid concern, especially like in the case of this question. Well, somebody already put into ERP that we got the quote and here's, somebody did work in ERP. So this another great part of Fusion Manage being cloud-based is there is an API and it's always listening. And it is absolutely possible and even common to connect Fusion Manage as a PLM system to other business systems. So a good example would be when we look at our bills of material and our items, and we have a list of approved manufacturers, and more importantly, we have costing information here. Typically, I wouldn't expect this to be managed separately. Costing is ERP world, right? Execution. We're maybe even issuing POs as part of our ERP system. Fusion Manage doesn't issue POs. You technically could configure that. I've done that for somebody in the past, but your ERP system is paying people for stuff, and it knows what stuff costs. You could absolutely, and I would argue, especially over the long term, should integrate your PLM with your ERP so that someone in procurement who mostly lives in ERP, they get a new quote on this thing you buy, they type in a number there, nobody retypes that number here. Either on demand or periodically, Fusion Manage either goes and pulls that information from ERP, or ERP sends it over and says there's an update to the cost on this part, update it. So absolutely, you can integrate PLM with ERP. You can integrate Fusion Manage with ERP so that you're only putting in a given piece of information one time, or only indicating that you've done something one time. You should never have to say, go to this system, okay, I did this, now go to the other system and say again that I did this thing. The two should absolutely be integrated. All right, and I don't see that we've had any other questions come in. So Ashley, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up here.
Okay, well, thank you, Forrest, for the presentation, and thank you all for attending. This will conclude our broadcast. If you think of additional questions, you can simply reply to that confirmation or reminder email you received from GoToWebinar. We can get those to Forrest or your sales rep to get your questions answered. Once again, as we close, a short survey will pop up, and also a reminder that you'll receive an email tomorrow, which will contain a link for the recording that you can watch again. So thanks again for attending, and have a great day, everybody.